Welcome to Small Arm Solutions. Today we're talking about a topic I've talked about in the past, the next generation service weapon. Now we've talked about this a little bit, but I continue to work, continue to research, and continue to try to find out what's going on with it. The more and more I see of it, it's disgusting, which is why I call it NGSW Section 8 for all Army brass. Because this program has been a complete disgrace from the top down. And we're going to be getting into a lot of details, and I'm going to be reading a lot because I don't memorize small details too well anymore, but I want to make sure I get out the proper information. First of all, let's talk about what this gun actually was. The Army's basically created a ballistic twin to its 7.62 millimeter counterpart. Basically, all we did was we took a 7.62 by 51, necked it down to take a 135 grain projectile for the most part, and then we boost up the pressures from 52 to 55,000 psi up to 80,000 psi, which we're going to get into because that's not all necessarily true. Now, the requirement for penetration of this program was completely unjustified. We all hear everybody talking about how we had to defeat this body armor. Well, not in one place in the globe has the United States come across any adversary that is equipped with that kind of body armor, anywheres. So when the Army went to Congress, that was basically what they told Congress they were going to do. They were looking for a new weapon that was supposed to bridge the gap between 5.56 millimeter and 7.62, which we're going to get to in a minute. Now, if you were to take a 7.62 by 51 full metal jacket with one of the Army's new 6.5 by 51 full metal jackets loaded in a standard cartridge case, which is going to be the ammunition they're mostly going to be using, you're basically seeing a ballistic twin. It affects the same way on body armor. In fact, at pretty much point-blank range, that neither one of those two will go through body armor. The only way the 6.8 by 51 is any usefulness is in the 80,000 psi AP load. And again, the only way you get any better performance out of the 6.8 by 51 is with that 80,000 psi AP load. And of course, we're also creating a new cartridge that basically NATO has nothing to do with. So if we were to get into trouble, any of our units overseas, and we needed ammunition, nobody could supply us with that ammunition because everybody else is still using NATO standard calibers. So we've now completely done away with NATO standardization. Now, again, the entire basis of this was to defeat level 4 body armor at 500 meters. At 500 meters, that's absolutely ludicrous. The M16 will do it up to 200 yards, M4 200 yards, which is practical because your actual range you're going to be engaging targets is going to be between, probably 50 meters and 100, 150 meters. 200 yard shots can be pretty rare, especially what we've seen over the last, Vietnam to now. The same logic with penetration of body armor was the same thing that the Army used to justify the MHS program, or the Next Generation Service Pistol, or the M17. It said right in their document they were looking for something that was going to increase penetration over the existing 9mm. Again, this contract, or this authorization, or this RFQ, this was approved by Congress to have a more improved cartridge. But what did we do? We're now using the exact same cartridge as the 9mm NATO. We've not improved anything. So basically, the entire premises of both of these programs, the way it was presented to Congress, was false, because we have nothing better than we did before. So let's talk a little bit about defeating body armor. In essence, the NGSW program is set to effectively double the range of the 5.56 millimeter and to quadruple the power requirement of the M4 as well with the 80,000 psi cartridge. Now, we're going to talk about there's 4 different cartridges that we have for the 6.8 by 51. Only one of them is the 80,000 psi, and that is an AP round. Setting your requirements to 500 meters is completely outrageous. Any combat veteran or anybody who's been in any of our engagements since the Vietnam War, you're not taking shots to human targets out to 500 meters. It's very, very rare. Once you get into 500 meters, you are now in range of mortar, artillery, tanks, and air support. So basically, those ranges, you're not going to be engaging with a rifle anyways. Now, the high-pressure cartridge is another thing we're going to talk about, too. It's made up of 3 components. You have the brass cartridge case, you have the washer, and then you have the base. Now, this puts the soldier at significant risk. If any one of those cartridges was to fail with that 80,000 psi, you're basically going to blow it up inside the rifle, and the rifle is going to be done. It's going to be not serviceable in the field. You're not going to be able to clear anything with it. Now, let's also, another little tidbit of information for you, too. Why do we have a 3 cartridge case solution? Because the 2 cartridge case solution, there would have been a patent infringement on. So we're now putting our soldiers at risk by giving them a cartridge that if it was to fail, and there's a very good chance that it could fail because, again, you have more components, you're more likely to have it fail. When the body armor was basically shown that it wasn't reality, the Army came out with now saying we have a gun that will better penetrate cinder bricks. So now we're turning cover into concealment. Which again, if you look at the 7.62 data, which we already have in the standard loads, there's absolutely no benefit to it. Now, what could they have done? If they still wanted to go with a caliber, which they shouldn't have anyways, which is a full-powered rifle cartridge, they could just as well have gone with the 7.62 NATO, boosted that up to 80,000 PSI. They could have maintained NATO standardization, and that would have gotten somewhat of an improvement using the 80,000 PSI cartridge. That's not what they did. Now, get a little bit more into NATO standardization. Now, there's a reason why we have NATO standardization. If any one of our NATO allies was to get into trouble or they would need to be resupplied, we would be able to supply them with ammunition and magazines that would work in their weapons. That's the whole reason why we have this compatibility. By doing that, we're basically putting ourselves at risk of being the only country in the world who uses this cartridge. And then, on top of that, we have another issue. We have one ammunition manufacturer who makes it for the U.S. government, which is Lake City Army Ammunition Plant. So let's say we get into a World War III scenario. All you have to have is one missile or one suicide bomber to go disable Lake City Army Ammunition Plant. Every M8 or every one of these belt-fed machine guns ones that we have now, they're out of ammo. So now you have basically clubs, which is, again, the reason why you have NATO standardization. Now, what should have the Army done? This is really the case. This is really what it really gets down to. The point of the NGSW program was to bridge the gap between 5.56 and 7.62. Basically, you want to have something better than 5.56 that's going to give the soldier an increased capability, but you're not going to a full-power battle rifle, which you're going backwards to the same problems we had in Vietnam. Well, that's not what the Army did. They spent billions of dollars to go backwards to basically have a modified 7.62 by 51 full-power battle cartridge. Now, what should have been done? What should have been done is actually pretty simple. Instead of going to a full-power battle cartridge up to 135 grains, we go with a 6mm around 95 grains. What does that come out to? Pretty much the 6.8 Remington SPC. Now, you put that in a SIG Spear or put it in even an LWRC 6.8, you have a rifle now which you still have the assault rifle capability. You're controllable on fully automatic. You're still carrying 30 rounds in a magazine. You're slightly increasing your combat load, but you're still going to be carrying about the same amount of ammunition. You're going to increase your penetration. You're going to increase your terminal performance at normal combat ranges. So you're giving them a major benefit, but you're not taking anything away from them. Well, that's not the case we have with our new weapon that we have. The new weapon that we have, we basically have taken away their capacity to carry ammunition. You've gone from a basic combat load of 210 rounds to 100. We're going to get a little bit more into those numbers in a little bit. Let's talk about another little tidbit about this new program. The XM157 Laser Combat Optic. Each of these optics has a ballistic computer programmed with a trajectory and a laser rangefinder. Automatically calculates bullet trajectory. The optics can be just as easily adapted to a 7.62 at 51. Massive amount of tax towers have gone into this overpriced optic. They're trying to make every soldier into a sniper. An individual combat soldier is not a sniper. He engages targets at combat ranges, which is well under 300 meters. Again, every action we've had, with the exception of a few situations in the mountains of Afghanistan, and again, that's in the open mountains. This XM7 would not have even benefited anybody in the inside of the mountains where you're actually in the woods. So this particular optic cost the U.S. taxpayers $12,604 per unit. So we're going to give an average soldier who's not going to engage targets beyond 100 to 200 meters a optic that goes out to, this should be at least 500 to 1,000 meters. And we're trying to turn individual soldiers into snipers, which is not going to happen. Again, cost, think about it. An average M4 probably costs around $650, $680 to the U.S. taxpayer. An individual optic, you're talking about $12,604. So let's talk about a little bit about the reality of the situation. There was no reason for this cartridge whatsoever, because it does nothing significantly better than that of the M80 ball cartridge. The Army loves to throw around this comment, significant leap of technology before they make a change. So basically, you have a 6.8 cartridge. Every reason for its adoption and to get going with this program has been debunked. The body armor does not exist. One of the interesting notes that I got in one of my comments on the NGSW program was somebody mentioning that particular type of body armor at level 4, it's not used anywhere else in the world but American citizens. I'm not a conspiracy person, so we're not going to go down that road. But something certainly to think about. Now again, putting a conventional loaded 6.8 by 51 and a 7.62 millimeter side by side, both bullets perform more or less the exact same. Again, we're not talking about the AP load, this 80,000 PSI. The program failed to deliver a round to bridge 5.56 and 7.62. As I just said, we should have been going between 90 and 100 grains in a 5.56 millimeter platform. Again, the 6.8 SBC would have been ideal for that. Instead, you went with 135 grain, which is basically, our 7.62 by 51 is 147 grains, the same thing. You're doubling the weight of the current 5.56 cartridge, the M855. Never has the military increased their performance platform by 100%. It's never been done before. Failed to develop a new round with sufficient improvement in trajectory to justify the investment. Failed to develop a better round to penetrating everyday obstacles on the battlefield, such as the S762 NATO. Now, the Army would have developed their current F7.62 by 51 millimeter with the same AP 80,000 PSI round. We would have seen similar performances as you're seeing with the 6.8 by 51. And now's the other issue. The M7 and the M14 favored power over volume. Again, power over volume, World War I. World War II somewhat, where you had stalemates at long range, you had trench warfare, you were actually engaging targets at that distance. That is not what we have. The 5.56, however, has served for close quarter battles since the Vietnam War. Once the Vietnam War hit, everything was up close and personal. You were looking well under 100 yards. Most ambushes occurred under 50 meters. That's how close that they were. So this new rifle that we have would not serve at all in urban, jungle, or wooded areas, which make up most of the combat the U.S. has seen since World War II. Because again, you have a rifle now that cannot win a battle against an AK-47. Again, we go back in history a little bit of time to the Vietnam War. Why did we get rid of the M14 to begin with? We got rid of it because our troops were overwhelmed by the suppressive fire of AK-47s. Most of the guys with the M14s didn't even engage, and there's several reports that state this, which is why the M16 came out, which we'll talk about that in a few minutes too. Also, as many of you may or may not know, there are 4 different rounds for this rifle. Due to the Army not having the ranges capable of handling this new 80,000 PSI AP cartridge, they have a decreased power round that's been developed to use 5.56 millimeter ranges. There's the first round. Second was the AP 80,000 PSI. For the first time, a soldier would fire an 80,000 PSI round and would be in combat because they're not using this cartridge to train soldiers with. They'd only be issuing it in a combat situation. Now, when you go from 55,000 PSI to 8,000 PSI, you have new recoil weapon, you have new trajectory, everything. So in essence, when you switch from the standard cartridge to this new 8,000 PSI AP cartridge, you're firing 2 different weapons. Well, there's another YouTuber who does a lot of good stuff with ammunition. Banana Ballistics, I believe it was called. He did a nice little test comparing the 277 Fury to the 308. And he found basically nothing that the Full Metal Jacket 277 Fury would do that the 308 wouldn't with that conventional cartridge. So we talk about penetrating body armor. What are you going to do? It's the same distance shooting, it's the same penetration between the two of them, but yet one of them we've gone to a non-standard cartridge. Then we have the blank firing round. Let's go about a little bit of the cons of the NGSW program, more the negative aspects as I see it. The Army's only mentioned doubling the power of this cartridge. It doubles its weight, significantly reduces mobility, decreases tempo of fire of engagement, unnecessary mechanical complexity with ammunition, as we said. This is not like a jammed cartridge case in an M4, which you can basically mortar it and you can get the gun back into action, unless you have a kaboom. You have a kaboom with most guns are done, but if you just have a standard malfunction or you have a standard problem with a cartridge case, you can generally get it out of a standard M4 and get it back into action. This thing here, 8,000 PSI, you're basically just destroying a weapon. Now, again, we talked about the Vietnam. You have uncontrollable full auto fire, basically the same problem we had with the M14 as a service rifle in Vietnam. Now, I'm sure most of you know our enemies still are using AK-47s. That is still the primary service weapon. So we're now going backwards from having a rifle that was designed to meet the AK-47's requirements for volume of fire and increase its increased hit probability, which the M16 did over the AK-47 in Vietnam. We're going now backwards to the rifle that we took out of service because it was not suitable for modern combat. It was suitable only for long-range distances. Now, again, with this special purpose barrel, you're looking at a barrel life of a whole 13,000 rounds with the 80,000 PSI cartridge. And if you were to go fully automatic with that new barrel, you're talking around maybe a life of 3,000 rounds. An M4 with moderate to heavy use will last you between 15 and 20,000 rounds. So now we also have a rifle that we're decreasing its longevity and its durability. Now we're also issuing a new weapon with a sound suppressor. Now, that sound suppressor, from what everybody has said who's used the gun and the testing that's been done, it is not hearing safe. Now, if you were to take that off, you have a weapon that is for sure going to damage your hearing from that muzzle blast, with that short 13.5-inch barrel or so. You're going to destroy your ears. So you have a weapon that is basically useless without the suppressor. It also is, when you take it off, it also throws off the balance of the weapon for as far as it functions. It's somewhat similar to that of like a Krakow, where you have to have a specific muzzle brake on it to alter the gas because of the way that the port is to make it function. So that's the issue we have as well. The loadout. Again, the loadout for this new M7 rifle is 100 rounds. That's 5 magazines. The average person with an M4 carries 210. Now again, 210 rounds. You also have bandoliers that hold 7 little boxes of 30 rounds on stripper clips, which you can just throw over your chest. Now, for the same combat weight, but you're increasing the burden on the soldier as well. Because again, you're getting additional weight of the rifle, additional weight of the ammunition with less. So for the same combat load, you're carrying less ammunition with more of a burden on the soldier. Now the soldier is going to give up 70 rounds for his basic combat load and increase his burden by 5 pounds with this new weapons platform, which consists of the rifle, the optics, and sound suppressor, compared to the M4. Now for this XM250 light machine gun, they will lose 200 rounds and add 3.6 pounds to from the M249's basic loadout. Now we get back into the issues with the modular handgun weapon systems, because the same thing has happened with the M7. Now, we now have an external piston which was designed for healthy reliability reasons. Now, we talk about NATO testing. I don't think too much of a lot of the endurance testings that we see on YouTube, because they're not realistic. What I mean is, when you look at how weapons are actually tested, if you have a mud test, you have specifically set up a certain way. Once you meet that and the weapon passes, you're done. You don't go further than that to see how far the gun's going to go, because that's not what the requirement is. The way military requirements are set up, you basically I have to have X amount of rounds in this amount of time with no failures. If a rifle meets that, it's there. It doesn't have to go beyond to destruction. Most of the tests that you see on YouTube are destruction tests. You're basically keeping on going until something fails. That's not realistically how it's done. Now, InRange TV did actually a really good job with it. They got their hands on one of these M7s that did a regular mud test. Now, the mud test that he did, again, I'm not going to say that it's NATO or standard, but the mud that he used was like what you would see in a NATO test. You actually have a few different kinds of mud for NATO testing. And like most external piston guns, within the first or second round, it failed. And it failed because, unlike the internal piston, where you have 2 gas ports that blow gas out and it blows debris out of the ejection port, this just opens up and mud gets in, and basically mud gets in the chamber and it gets in between the carrier and the upper receiver, and it locks it into place. So the mud that SIG was using in their test, and every picture that we saw and the government saw, this mud was not really mud. It was more of like a sludge, a greasy sludge that basically would work as a lubricant instead of as actually a mud test. So there's some disingenuity of how the testing is being done. Now, again, this is something to be said too. If you look at, again, InRange he does a pretty good job with most of his. I like the way he does it, because he's using real world mud. And he basically doesn't try to destroy something. He does a pretty good job at seeing what the capabilities are. If you were to look at every video that InRange has done on external piston guns, and we'll start talking about AR-10s, LMT, even the Brownells AR-10, these things sail through mud tests with the ejection port open and mud on the side, blows it right out. That test stops HK416s, it stops SIG 516s, it stops AK-47s dead in their tracks. If you look at everything anybody's ever done with an AK-47 in heavy mud, mud gets in between where the bolt carrier and the receiver meet and the bolt can't close. So we actually have a less reliable weapon than what we currently have when it comes to mud tests. Okay, now once again, we're in the same problem with the MHS program, where we've adopted a weapon without testing it. Now, the M7 was adopted a couple of years ago. I don't remember when the actual date that was, 1 or 2 years ago. There's an article just on military.com dated March of 2023, where the Army is now testing their new guns in extreme environments. So we're looking well after the time it was tested, well after it was adopted. Right now, in March of 2023, new guns are being tested in extreme environments. So we've adopted something, we don't even know how it works. Once again, it was the same as the M17, where we didn't do any testing, so we didn't know how it was going to perform in adverse conditions. We just bought it like that, with no justification other than price. So again, we have concerns of failures in the field with the M7 as well, such as the charging handle sticking, the side charging handle cuts on the thumbs upon the bolt release, suppressors not hearing safe, folding stocks are hard to actuate. Taking suppressors off the weapons would throw off the balance of the operating system, which control muzzle flash and muzzle blast, as well as recoil management. By removing the suppressor, the system is thrown off balance and will definitely damage the shooter's hearing. So again, we've adopted a weapon that's not any better than what we had in our 7.62, decreases our capabilities we have for our infantrymen, adds weight, takes away ammunition. And now is really the kicker. You guys are probably going to get a kick out of this. What does all this actually cost? Well, I got some documents from their government documents that have the actual prices on them. So let's start first talking about ammunition. The general purpose training cartridge. This is their full metal jacket. $3.35 a round. Reduced range, $3.39 a round. Blank, $1.58 per round. And now wait till you hear this. The special purpose AP round, $21.47 per round. So one combat loadout of 20 rounds would cost the taxpayer $2,147. Something is really, really wrong with that. And my guess is I don't believe this rifle is going to actually get to see light of day in combat. But if it does, I have a feeling our soldiers are probably going to be using the training ammunition, not this special purpose AP ammunition. So again, we have a bigger rifle. We basically have a enhanced version of the M14, which is taking away from capabilities. Now, what's the cost of these weapons? The cost of the M7, $5,140 per rifle, including the sound suppressor. Think about that. An M4 costs around $600. Very interesting. The NGSW fire control optic, this wild scope that's all computerized, $12,604 per optic, for a grand total of $17,744 per complete rifle. I'm not going to tell you how many levels that this really annoys me, and anybody knowing what's going on accepts this. So now the cost of the squad automatic weapon, $10,869 per machine gun. Now, I'm not exactly sure the cost of an M240 Bravo, but I believe they were around $3,000, $3,000 or $4,000. So you've drastically increased that. Again, the cost of the M4 is around $600, $640, that area there. So let's talk a little about World War III scenarios. The whole purpose of the M14 was soldiers being overwhelmed with AKs with their accurate suppressive fire. The switch to the 5.56mm M16 allowed U.S. troops to match and overcome VC even when outnumbered due to the suppressive characteristics of the M16 and the 5.56mm, which were more accurate and more controllable than even the AK was. The M7 is designed for only one combat scenario, open plains of Afghanistan. No other scenario will a soldier gain any benefit. They will be reducing their capabilities. The Army's AP distance requirement would be provided for a traditional system such as tanks, artillery, mortars, grenades, launchers, and air support. Again, infantry soldiers are not going to engage targets at 500 meters. It's not going to happen. When you get out to that distance, again, mortars, artillery, airstrikes, this is where conventional forces break off from small arms and start going to other forms. So again, this distance is ludicrous. It's asinine. The attitude of counterinsurgent battles used in previous wars, such as Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq, were unable to use the normal resources due to fear of civilian casualties. The M7 is not suitable for low-intensity conflicts. Infantry soldiers are assumed to win World War III by themselves without support of such weapons is ludicrous. In other words, wars today are fought with higher tech weapons and not just small arms. You have support that's going to save a regular soldier from engaging at close quarters. You have some distance between the two of you. You're going to use your artillery and you're going to use everything else. So again, that gap where you're going to be engaging with small arms is going to be that 200 meter area, which the weapon that we've just adopted offers no benefit over the current weapon that we have. So my guess is what's going to happen is this is going to fail. You're looking at basically at best a DMR rifle like the M110 or the Mark 12. Yeah, Mark 12 would have been a nicer rifle to carry. I don't believe this will ever see general use. Now, basically, if you want to replace the M4, I see a new infantry rifle program which would bridge the power between 5.56 and 7.62 NATO. not retaining a full-powered 7.62mm battle rifle and eliminating all the pros of an assault rifle, a 5.56mm rifle. And my guess is once this happens, you're going to be seeing some more upgrading of the current M4 platforms. Now, again, I feel, and I think there's many other experts out there who would agree, the 6.8 SPC really would have been an ideal position for this, giving a lot of benefit without taking any away of the capabilities that we currently have with our current weapons platforms. Now there's another little issue that little pink elephant in the house too, which is effects on this industry. SIG is now holds the contracts for basically every U.S. small arm: the M7, the M250, M17, M18 suppressors, and the Surge contract. Other companies in this industry who are now seeing this are basically saying, why bother submitting to any U.S. government contracts, because it's all being funneled into one company. We're using every single aspect of weapons that we have is all filtering towards SIG. Now, I'm not here to criticize SIG. I'm criticizing the U.S. governments of what's going on, because something is wrong. So other companies are basically saying, why bother submitting? If a new contract comes out for a new weapon, they're going to basically assume that this is going to go to SIG, or the contract's going to be built around a SIG rifle, so why bother? There are far better options out there, as we talked about, the SIG Spear or the LWRC 6.8 and 6.8. At the very least with the M7, but still not advisable. Get rid of the 6.8, go back to the 7.62x51, and do your 80,000 PSI cartridge with an AP round, because you're going to get basically the same characteristics, but you're going to have compatibility with NATO. You also have compatibility with NATO magazines and NATO ammunition. Now, oddly enough, the Russians have figured this out. The Russians bridged the gap between the 5.45 and the 7.62x54R with the 6.02x41mm cartridge. Now, it's still brand new. We don't know how far it's going to go. They've successfully done it. They've bridged the two, which is what we were supposed to do with this program in this country. So now another little interesting tidbit, which I will leave you with to ponder. True Velocity has filed a lawsuit against SIG alleging stolen trade secrets by the way of hiring one of their engineers and, quote, brazenly and wrongfully misappropriated the plaintiff trade secrets to obtain an unfair competitive advantage. The lawsuit involves the SRIA, or Short Recoil Impulse Averaging weapon system developed by General Dynamics Ordnance and Tactical Systems with True Velocity ammunition, which feels that what was used in the development of the M250 NGSW belt-fed machine gun. You have legal issue with True Velocity against SIG. You have the SIG is going after the Army. They're competing between the two of them against the proper proprietary rights to this platform as well. So we still have all kinds of problems that are going on. So again, this is just more information that I've put out, that I've learned, because again, I continue doing research. And also, for your information, my information does not come off the internet. As some of you may or not know, I work in this industry. I have contacts throughout this industry, pretty much in every company. I work mostly with every company as a contractor or in some other way, whether it was writing on their products or whatever. So I've worked within these companies. So the information that I am giving you does not come from Googling it on the internet. This information comes from sources who are in the know of what's going on. So I do hope you enjoyed this. If you do, please click like, please subscribe, even share. Thank you.